Hi, this is Annie Grace, and this is This Naked Mind podcast. I am really excited about today's guest. We have met each other a while ago and kind of become friends, talked about lots of different stuff. And Sherry Gaba is with me today, and Sherry has a really impressive background. And so we're going to talk about Sherry's story, but also about all the different incredible things she's doing and really target in on an area that often gets overlooked, which is love addiction, relationship addiction, codependency, all the things that, sometimes we can turn to once we kick an alcohol habit or other habit that isn't serving us well. So Sherry is a certified recovery coach. She's a psychotherapist, most notably on VH1 Celebrity Rehab, which is quite cool. And she's also the author of 2 books, The Law of Sobriety and The Marriage and Relationship Junkie. So welcome, Sherry. Thank you for being here.
Oh, Annie, thank you so much for what you're doing in the world and for giving me this platform to talk about this subject. I'm really grateful to you.
Oh, that's awesome. So why don't you just start with your story, and then we'll get into kind of, the teaching
Sure.
part of it.
Well, I know that a lot of the listeners are in recovery or starting recovery, and sometimes what I see is that a lot of people, when they do get sober, often they turn to other addictions, other process addictions. My story in particular is my first disease would be love addiction and codependency, and that at times in my life I abused substances along with that disease, which I believe love addiction and codependency is a disease, just like any other disease or any other substance abuse disease. And we don't even have to call a disease a disorder or, function. It's just maladaptive behavior. What happened for me was, because of this issue around early trauma, I became a love addict. I tell the story often. I was in an incubator. I was premature. I was 2.5 months early. In those days, mothers weren't allowed to bond with their babies, so I didn't actually meet my mother for 2.5 months. And even when I went home, I would turn blue and she'd go to feed me. So there was really no early bonding, attachment, connection. And we know, the opposite of addiction is connection. And so really, metaphorically, I was always looking for the boob, so to speak, like always looking for that connection. And so the way I did that was through love. And if I wasn't in a relationship, I was in complete terror and panic. And the substance abuse really came about with my dating, just a lot of anxiety. I don't identify as an alcoholic. I don't know, how your audience feels about that. I definitely have abused at times in my life around dating and social stuff, but my life never became out of control or unmanageable, or never lost jobs, never lost my daughter, all the usual blah, blah, blah. It was never an issue for me. But, I like to talk about it because, when you're dealing with a process addiction, other addictions can come into play, other abuse can come into play. And I know that a lot of people, when they get sober, often there's that, oh my God, I got to do something else to feel that dopamine high. And so often people turn to, love. They talk about that in the meetings, in the 12-step meetings, people have, they look at each other in the room and it's like, oh my God. And, there you are, you're back on that dopamine high. So that's my story. I've worked in addiction, for years. I worked at Promises.
So Sherry, I'd love to know just a little bit more about those intervening years, like I can totally feel you when you're talking about especially with my own kids. I imagine how it would be not to be able to hold them, or how they would feel, or how a child is crying not out of hunger, but just for a need of being loved. And I mean, there's so many studies about that as well. Monkeys who just weren't given affection when they were young, and how that impacts everything, how that gives them, so many different inabilities to really truly connect with other people. It has such a deep thing. So how did that, in the intervening years, like how did that really manifest in your life?
Well, I didn't have safety or security. I didn't have that early attachment. So I never felt safe. And so I personally was always looking outside myself, just like, people that have substance abuse issues, you're looking outside yourself to feel that terror, to feel that emptiness, to feel that loneliness. And so when I got into high school, prior to high school, I was kind of the ugly duckling, the girl with the Jewish, frizzy hair and flat boobs and pimples. And then all of a sudden I got kind of, semi-attractive in high school, and I had my first love and my first boyfriend. And just like, sometimes alcoholics will talk about, and again, your audience may not refer to alcoholism or alcoholics. I'm just doing it as a way to just identify that issue.
Sure.
Just like you're chasing that first drink or that first high, the love addict is always kind of chasing that first romance. And so I fell in love, and he lived across the street, and he was just adorable, and he had beautiful blue eyes, and we danced to the song Sugar Sugar, which was like this big song back in the late 70s or mid 70s. And there I was, I'm in love. And so I really, at that point in time, I felt like all my worth was based on whether or not I had someone to love me, to give me attention, to acknowledge me, to validate me. And when that relationship ended and he broke up with me, it was devastating. That was where, you can just see all the obsessive behavior, the low self-esteem, the desperation. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I feel so empty. This pounding terror inside my heart. And so from that point on, I always had to have a relationship to fill me up. And so I met my first husband. As I share in my book, The Marriage and Relationship Junkie, it's not just a book about, healing. It's a book that also I share my story. And so 4 marriages later, always the bride, never the bridesmaid, here I am. Got married for all the wrong reasons, had very low self-esteem, couldn't be alone, felt like my self-worth was based on, the next guy or the next husband or the next relationship. And I made really poor choices. And, Annie, if I could do anything in this world, is to help that young lady out there, or young man, that you don't ever have to, quote, settle. You get to really make, life is full of choices, and the choices we make have ramifications. I personally became a single mother very young because of these choices and because of my love addiction issue. I love my daughter. She's amazing. She's a, big publicist. She's very successful, hugely successful. And not just from the outside. I have a beautiful granddaughter. She's a great mother, a great partner to her boyfriend. And regardless of all my mistakes, she came out great. However, it was a really hard life. It was really a hard life being a single mom and trying to kind of fit that empty space, like, oh, I need to be a real family. So then next husband, and always looking to be this perfect, family of what in those days, there weren't as many single moms. I was often shunned by other mothers, the PTA quote moms, really, I was like 10 years younger than most of them. I suppose they were concerned that I was going to go after their husbands. I mean, I don't know what it was, but I was not welcomed. So it was a very lonely existence, and all because I couldn't be with myself. And so my goal is to just help, anybody out there that is wondering, I know there's something not right here. My intuition tells me this isn't right, but I am terrorized. I just cannot be without this person. Help. And then they end up marrying that person or living with them or whatever, and then that just changes their whole life. Their whole life story changes.
So when you were in these marriages, was it that you fell quickly out of love, and that's why you would leave the marriage?
Well,
so you felt like you settled over and over?
I mean, 2 left me. I left 2. No, I just made bad decisions. I mean, the first one I probably didn't even love. I married completely on the rebound. That's my daughter's father. Although, I'm so grateful I have my daughter, but that was just a huge mistake. In fact, I have a funny story about that. When they asked for me to do the first dance with my first love at this wedding, most people would think, oh, my dad. And what I was thinking is, oh my God, is my first love here? Is he coming to dance with me? I mean, I was just crazy. And I wasn't really in love, And
not the man you were marrying.
I wasn't. Yeah, exactly. So it's just a crazy story. And I have crazy stories, I can go on and on. I mean, my 3rd marriage, as soon as I was ready to go down this aisle, and there was this big, gate that opened up, and there's the bride, all the pedestals of flowers fell on my dress. And it's like, if that isn't like a sign, like, what are you doing, Sherry? And a few weeks before that wedding, I didn't want to go through with it, but 300 people later, I couldn't say no. And, I tell this story because it's very embarrassing, but I want to bring the shame out. I want to eradicate the stigma and the shame about multiple marriages and multiple relationships, because I know there are people out there that have done the same thing and feel so ashamed and so embarrassed. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. We make these choices because of, early history and early things that have happened to us, trauma related. And to have compassion for yourself and to understand why you're making these decisions, and then grow from there. Excuse me.
So, what would you tell someone? I mean, I know people like this for sure. I can even relate in some of my own life to just this feeling of not wanting to be alone, like the very, very deep feeling of I'd much rather have, a human being in this house with me than be by myself. And that feels, I mean, in the conversations that I've had with people that are struggling with this, it feels insurmountable. It feels like
it's crippling.
It's crippling. It is honestly like being alone feels like you're on fire. It feels like you cannot survive it. You can't breathe. Everything is pressing in on you. You have to get out of the house immediately. Totally. And how do you even start? How do you start to learn how to be by yourself?
Well, what's so great is that the first step is that people are on this podcast today and they're listening to our interview, and that's the first step of awareness. The next step would be, often we talk about with alcohol too, it's getting out of the denial, because the truth is, that there's something wrong, but your fear of being alone is greater than the truth that you know. And so it's about really stepping into the truth and start. And that's like with any kind of recovery, getting honest with yourself. I would say for me, I did a lot of trauma work. I found an amazing trauma therapist. I do the same work myself with my clients. It's called somatic experiencing. And so you help people kind of get out of their, they get that old energy out of their body, that old toxic energy that comes from trauma. And, just making it simple, it's just getting rid of the old energy and so that you make room for positive and make room for, healing and health. And so that's the work that I did. There are many things people can do. They can, read about it. They can work with a life coach like myself, or I also do therapy and coaching. They can find a great meeting, like a love addict meeting, if they're open to that. And if they're not open to that, work with someone that really understands love addictions. There's all kinds of courses out there. There's all kinds of programs out there. And there's some really qualified people that can help someone through this process. But again, the first step is being honest, getting out of the denial, exploring your fears, really understanding what am I afraid of? Let's just bring it up. Let's make friends with it. Like, oh, there it is. I'm afraid I'll never meet anybody. I'm afraid that I will be alone forever. I'm afraid I'm too old. Really kind of like, let's dive into these fears, and then again, like I said earlier, examining that suppressed trauma in childhood is really important. And, another word for trauma is just neglect. Were you neglected? Were you abandoned? Were your parents addicts and alcoholics? And were they emotionally and physically unavailable to you? Were you abused? Did you come from a divorce? Did you have to be the parent in your family? Really start uncovering these things and discovering, how those things are affecting your relationships today. And then, I'm all about being really loving and forgiving and compassionate with yourself. Like really, really compassionate, because you didn't wake up just like the alcoholic doesn't wake up and say, oh, I wanted to like fall asleep on the floor or out, in a bush. The love addict doesn't say, oh, I want to have 4 divorces later and lots of failed relationships. And, no, there are reasons for these things. So really love yourself and love that inner child, because that inner child needs that love. And forgive yourself and work with that shame, bring it up, make it, I'm much less shameful today than I've ever been. I mean, I tell this story. I have somebody wonderful in my life right now. And I went on this date with him months after I had to heal, because I knew that I couldn't go from one relationship to the other. So I took some time for myself and really, really grew. And I remember him asking me, something about how long were you married, da, da, da. And in the past, I would lie and just say, I was just married once, divorced once. And this time I actually said, I've been married 4 times. And what was so funny is he'd been married 3 times. So there you go, So it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's much worse to lie and to hide and to live in secrets, because, we're as sick as our secrets, and you don't want to start out a relationship or dating by lying. So really getting honest with yourself and with others, and just doing the work prepares you for that healthy relationship. And, really start trusting yourself, letting go, and just finding really good support.
And would you say, like, when you're, ready, you've gone through the awareness, you're aware, you've kind of come out of a bit of denial about it, and you're saying, okay, what's the first step? Is that first step to be alone for a period of time?
In my opinion, you need that alone time to really work on yourself. For me, it was joining, an Al-Anon program, because my last husband had been an alcoholic and had kept relapsing, and I was just obsessed with getting him sober. I was just obsessed, and that was my addiction, really, to be honest, was him. And so I had to find, for me, a program that would help me work on my boundaries and work on how to say no, and work on letting go, and finding some kind of spiritual solution to be able to let go. So for me, Al-Anon was very helpful. That isn't, 12 steps is not for everybody. So I'm not necessarily saying that's your solution, but that really helped me. And then I did this trauma work that I talked about earlier. That was really helpful, finding someone that can help you with that trauma, not just a talk therapist, but someone that really understands that stuff inside of you that needs to come out. And finding a great relationship coach, or, read material, read my book, The Marriage and Relationship Junkie, so you can understand. Take my quiz. I have a quiz at sherrygaba.com to see if you are a love addict, and these are some of the tools that I recommend to really start uncovering this.
And what sort of withdrawal can you expect? I mean, is that the same as something like drinking, that you can have an actual withdrawal?
Well, it's basically touching on the same reward centers as addiction. It's the same feeling. It's like the heroin addict that needs their fix. Well, you're looking for that fix of another human being to complete you, to complete that terror, to complete that discomfort that you're feeling inside of yourself. So yes, it's like we talked about earlier. It's crippling. It's terrorizing, and you're not alone. And that's really important to understand. You're not really alone. I mean, I don't know, whatever your spiritual connection is, your support system. Like I said, I had a support system. I took up canoeing. I got in the water, and the water was really healing for me and very meditative. Maybe you want to take up something like yoga or meditation, or something that connects you to something, so you don't feel like you're alone. Because the truth of the matter is, we aren't alone. There is something divine out there that is holding us up when we feel like we can't be held up. It's, and the truth is, when you're in in a bad relationship, you're really more alone than you think you are. It's much worse to be lonely in a relationship than to be, quote, alone.
Yeah.
And then change your, I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. That's what my first book is based on. Change the verbiage. Say to yourself, I'm single, not like, oh, I'm alone. Like, can you just kind of tell the vibration is so different? Like, I'm single. I'm going to make new friends. I'm going to create a new life. Of course, this is all difficult when you're in so much emotional pain, and I so get it. But I promise you, it will not last forever. If you start the work and you start the healing, you will get through it, just like you got through, or getting through your other recoveries from other addictions.
And then so this is, if people are like, oh yeah, okay, this is definitely me. I do this. I bounce from relationship to relationship. I use relationships as a crutch. I use them as kind of my fix, so to speak. I go for that high of being in love. But what about for people who aren't doing that, aren't bouncing around, and but they feel something is wrong? Like, what are some signs? What is the difference between sort of being in love and truly, or having some sort of, just unhealthy obsession and not being truly in love, but just being kind of, like you said earlier, using that person as your drug, so to speak?
Well, I think a healthy relationship is nurturing. There isn't jealousy. There's a feeling of support. There's companionship. There's communication. There's real intimacy. I mean, you probably could speak better to this, because I know that you're happily married. And so you probably could talk about all the things that make a really healthy relationship. But if it's unhealthy and you're in this relationship and you know that there's something wrong, look at things like, are you crossing boundaries? Are you saying yes when you really mean no? Are you constantly afraid of, oh my God, what is he going to think if I do this? What, is he going to leave me? If you're single, or, are you afraid of the unknown? Are you in a lot of fear that you're never going to meet anybody? You're just panic stricken about that. Are you in a relationship where you're always trying to change someone? Are you always trying to fix them? Are you not accepting them for who they are? Are you needing that other person to make you feel whole? If you're in a relationship, do you feel less than when you're not with that person all the time? Or if you're not getting constant attention, validation, acknowledgement, are you always looking for others for affirmation and for self-worth? And are you just deathly afraid of abandonment and being left? And, maybe you're having some of those withdrawal symptoms when they go on vacation, or they're out playing golf with their buddies. Are you always feeling like you're kind of in a panic? Are you giving up who you are to be with this someone just so that you can get love and attention? I think those are the things you might want to look for. Obviously the obsession is part of the part of it, but these are the other elements that can be going on whether you're in a relationship or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in both. I've been in very unhealthy relationship and obviously very happily married. And I think you're right. I think that, a lot of where I saw in the unhealthy relationship, it was this sense of being on unstable ground. So whether that was, was he going to be jealous? Was I going to be jealous? Did I feel weird feelings of discomfort? It was so unpredictable. The ground was not stable beneath me. And so every step I took, it was like, am I tripping? Am I falling? Am I walking? What's today going to be like? There was, and you like to think, well, that's what makes it passionate. That's what makes it fun. It isn't predictable. It isn't just two old married people sitting around. But the truth is that, in a marriage that's really healthy, it feels like home. It feels safe. It feels like an extension of you. And you don't feel jealous of yourself. You don't feel upset with yourself for little things. Like it feels very, very stable and secure, like you're walking on firm ground. And I think that was really the biggest difference for me.
I love that. What a great way to describe that. What you're saying is that it just feels right. And as corny as that sounds, it really is true. It just feels right. At least that's how I'm feeling right now in a healthy relationship. And I'm hoping that it will endure. But I know that when I'm not in a healthy relationship, it is filled with drama. I'm always other focused. I'm always trying to fix them. I'm never happy with what I have. I'm always resentful. I'm always, uncomfortable in my own skin. And they become my project. And then I take the focus off myself and they become my focus. And it's debilitating. By the time I divorced my fourth husband, I had shingles. I was losing my hair. My daughter knew every time she spoke to me that I had spoken to him, or that I was, in one of those like cycles. The whole thing is there is this human nature. We want what we can have. We kind of want that bad boy, that drama. Oh my God, you want the intensity. Often that comes from because you came from a family, there was a lot of intensity and there was a lot of chaos. And so to you, that's normal. Now, although my parents loved each other very much, there was a lot of fighting that went on. They were always fighting about money or this or that, kind of like the Bickersons. And it really kind of set me up also that, somehow drama, high intensity. You can put me I was like the best family court mediator. That was something that I did in my career, because the more traumatic it is around me, the more I rise up, give it to me, give me that trauma, give me that rush, give me that high. And I remember I had a cousin who has a very successful marriage, many, many years. And she said, Sherry, I don't know if this is true. She goes, Sherry, but the right person is boring. It may be boring, but it's the right person. And I don't think that's completely true, but I think the idea of what she was trying to say is that it's like steady Eddie, even. When I entered into this last relationship, I took my time. I wasn't like, whoo, I just kind of was like, okay, let's just go with it. I'm not going to go into that's another thing, fantasy. I'm not going to go into fantasy that he's going to fix this whatever I'm going through and make everything better. And whatever is going on, I just stopped. I just didn't do that. I just said, okay, here's a person, let's go out. He's a nice company, nice companionship. I kind of kept it where it is in the moment instead of future tripping on what it's going to be or what it can be. I mean, I had a client that came in yesterday, and I mean, she's dating somebody that she knows isn't right. She goes, but I just see his potential. I see his potential. I'm like, stop. We don't marry potential. We don't get involved with potential. We just don't.
Mhm.
We just don't. So,
Yeah,
that's
because what you see in that is just a story you're telling yourself. I
right.
mean,
It's a delusion. And the whole thing, how I feel is just give up the delusion. Don't give up the love. I mean, there is
mhm.
love out there for you. Just don't, but give up the delusion, because getting rid of the delusion will set you free, and will set
Yeah,
you
that's powerful.
free,
So I have two more questions for you, Sherry. First of all, where, I know this comes from childhood trauma and stuff like that, but then also, this obsession with relationships in general. Some people haven't had a ton of trauma. I mean, is there something cultural or in the media that's influencing this as well?
Yeah, well, look at the movies that are out there. Like, I don't know if your audience can remember, Fatal Attraction. I mean, often media models they model these overly obsessive relationships. Like, think about all the music, I'm addicted to love. I mean, I can't sing worth anything, but the music that we hear, and then ruminating over the music I mean, how many of you listen to the same song over and over again? Or think of country music. That's all love addiction. I mean, but the biggest one that I'm thinking of is Fatal Attraction, where Michael Douglas and Glenn Close portray these characters who have this weekend affair, and then it turns into a nightmare, just a total nightmare. Douglas, he plays this man, Dan Gallagher, who's this one-time fling with Alex, and then it turns into this dirty game as Forrest performs violent acts. I mean, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but it's just complete obsessive love. And then another one I'm thinking of is Obsessed, where Allie Ladder pushes the envelope to show her coworker that she's never letting go no matter what. I mean, it's this idea of that. I think that was Beyonce that was in that film. And so there's just this obsessive love that's supposed to be like normal. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's just this whole romantic idea. I mean, Cinderella, kids are still watching Cinderella. I mean, I'm thinking of, I think there's another one, but I don't watch those trilogies, but I think there's a trilogy where I can't think of which one it is. I will never remember them in my brain, but there's this trilogy where she's after this main character, and it seems to be very obsessive. I mean, it's all around us, really.
Yeah. So how can we protect ourselves? How can we make sure like our passion stays within healthy territories and we're not crossing those lines?
Again, I'm going to go back to just being really honest with yourself. Like, what is it that's going to make me comfortable in my life? Is this really what I want? Do I really want to be in this constant state of fear? And when am I going to start looking within for the answers instead of always looking without? Like, that somebody else is going to make it okay, that somebody else is going to take care of me, and we're going to ride off to the sunset. Or the white picket fence. Like, when are we going to start, stepping into our own power? And once we do that, we're going to attract someone really great because we're feeling really great. I mean, that's what's happened for me. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that happened to you, but once you work on yourself and really take the time and get over the terror of being, quote, single, because I knew that if I just kept doing the same thing over and over again, I finally realized this is insanity, and I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and just learn how to be with myself. And I was single for 4 years, and I had the time of my life, and I was happy, and I'm really glad I met somebody great, but I was happy. I had new friends. I was canoeing. I was in the water. I had a sisterhood. I just left I will never be codependent. I can't say that. I will always be a codependent, but I will never behave in a codependent manner if I can help it. I'll always be working on that muscle, because I never want to go through the loss and then having nothing there. Like, here I am. Like, I've made you my whole life, and now here I am. I made you and you and your life and your life and your life, my life, and now here I am, and what's my life? I mean, even though I had work and I loved my career and I had my daughter, I still didn't have this full balanced life because they were my life.
Yeah.
So It's all about that. It's all about balance, working on a balanced existence.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Well, thank you so much. This has been really, really good. So where can people find you?
So I'm going to give a couple of resources, and maybe you can put it on the link. I don't know where you post this,
Sure.
but so the first is the Marriage and Relationship Junkie, where they can get on Amazon. The second is sherrygaba.com, where they can take a love addiction quiz, and I have all kinds of free blogs, and I have an ebook on love addiction that they can sign up for. And then I have a program called Wake Up Recovery. So if people want to like learn more about the law of attraction and, weaving that into their recovery, they can go to wakeuprecovery.com.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Sherry. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. And again, you're like amazing, Annie. I just love you. I think you're just amazing.
Oh, thank you. Well, this was a pleasure. This has been Annie Grace with This Naked Mind podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can learn more at thisnakedmind.com. And please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, as it really helps us spread the word.